Hi everyone, welcome back to another fly time video. This pattern is the outcome of me spending a lot of time throughout the last couple of months fly fishing and catching bugs. I spent a lot of my time wading in, catching bugs in the water, catching bugs as they've been hatching on the surface or through the surface film. I've been catching bugs as they've been flying around, looking under rocks, all that sort of thing. And I'm talking hours of it at different venues, different locations, but I've also spent a lot of time at my local reservoir. And I had a very specific purpose for putting this pattern together. I've been catching quite a few fish on pin fry patterns, either on or just under the surface, and I did well straight lining buzzers, in particular the purple buzzer that I tied in a previous video. I wanted to put a pattern together that incorporated this purple to be used primarily as a top dropper while straight lining buzzers. So when I'm fishing buzzers, I'll quite often be straight lining, and I'll like my top dropper to be something a bit scruffy, say a scruffy buzzer or something like a dealbach where it's just got a bit more dressing to it, just to help slow that descent from a top dropper perspective. And then the remaining 2 or 3 flies will then typically be your epoxy buzzers, just to help get them down a little bit quicker. What I also wanted this to do was to work as a generic or a general nymph, especially whilst washing lining when I was fishing these quite high up, so it could also then be taken by pin fry feeders. Now, apart from pin fry, there was often a lot of grouse wing, black silver horns, obviously a lot of buzzers because I've been fishing quite a lot of buzzers recently, and there was quite a lot of Ephemeroptera coming off too, in particular green drake. So nothing on this pattern has been tied by chance. Everything is there for a purpose, and a lot of thought process has gone into this, and I hope you like the pattern, and I hope it fishes well for you. What I want to do quickly is just go through what I perceive to be the important part of the pattern. Firstly, the tail. It's a generic nymph. I wanted it to have a tail, and I tried other colours. I've tried Coq de Leon. It just seemed to be black was the best performing one, so I've just gone with Indian cockhackle for the tail, dyed black. As you move up into the body, you're going to see the scruffy dubbing that I've used for the body. Now, that is to help represent the gills that you find on a lot of Ephemeroptera species, and in particular the green drakes, which are coming off at the time. As we go up into the ribbing, you'll see the purple that I mentioned previously. I wanted to incorporate the purple as a trigger point, as an attractor. And as you go up into the counter ribbing, you're going to see quite widely spaced silver wire. That's to help represent the gas buildup you find in chironomids. And it's quite widely spaced just to ensure that I don't trap too many fibers in. As we then move up into the thorax section, you'll see with the legs, I've got the kind of dubbing in there, so it's kind of there to give it a more rounded look to it and a bit of contrast into the legs. You can by all means just tie in a beard hackle and tie it as a dealbach. It works exceptionally well as that too. But I wanted to have a slightly more rounded profile and a little bit more contrast in the legs. The thread choice is also very specific. I have tried other thread colors like black, but the idea behind this thread choice is it's there to act as a blood buildup that you find in a lot of hatching insects. And the other benefit is if you leave any gaps in your dubbing while you're dubbing the body, you quite often see this little bit of kind of blood-like underbody to it. So it's a very, very useful color, and the thread choice is there for a reason too. Going into the cheeks, obviously with chironomid patterns, a lot of chironomid patterns will incorporate some form of cheeks into them, so it's partly there for that, but it's also there to be a trigger point for pin fry. So if there's any pin fry feeders about, because this is quite often fished high up, I wanted that additional pin fry-like trigger point to it. Even down to the hook point, I have tried straight pointed hooks on these. Yeah, they worked fine. I just found that with this curved hook point, I found that I got better lockups the way I was fishing it. So again, the hook point has also been chosen for a reason. So everything there has been thought out and has been put onto the hook for a very specific purpose. Let's go on the fly tying. The hook in the vise is a competition barbler size 12 in black nickel, and the thread I'm using is Vivus B11 14 aught in claret. Another good thread for this would be Uni 8 aught in wine, very, very similar thread. So I'm just going to start with a quick thread base. I'm going to work the thread just short of the bend. usually around about where a bar would be, and I'll end up finishing there. For the tail, I'm using Indian cockhackle dyed black. So take a few strands, I'm going to measure out to around about the length of the body, drop them in, just shorten them up, shorten them a little bit if I need to. That's about right. For one of the ribbings, I'm using Simplify Fine Tinsel in purple. I'll just drop that in at 45. And then for the second, I'm going to be using Simplify Silver Wire 0.2mm. So I'm just going to put a little bend in it, drop that in, and then just simply catch it all in. Just correct as I go if I need to. Okay, once I've got all that trapped in, just open my thread up, and I'll just catch it in whilst I'm waiting. I'll try to open up a little bit. Just help build in that tiny little bit of taper there. For the next bit, I have a dubbing mix I like to put together where I use only guard hairs from a natural hairs mask, and I only take nice dark guard hairs. So I don't want any light ones. So I always look for a hairs mask that's got nice dark guard hairs to it, and I'll mix it with black guard hairs off a dyed black hairs mask. I'll mix that to a ratio of around about 60-40, and I end up with a dubbing blend that looks like that. So really spiky looking dubbing mix. So I'm going to open up the thread quick. I'm just going to do a quick split thread dubbing loop. I'll just use that to keep it open. So you can see there, just place it in, and that allows me to keep it open and free up my hands. Now for the next bit, I use low tax wax, so that's from Loon, and I take a dab of it in my fingers. I don't like to use the container to use as an applicator. So what I'll do is I'll dab it into the thread like so. That way I have control over it. I'll just wipe off the excess into the top of into the lid. So if I end up having too much on there, I don't waste it. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to saturate the thread just by dabbing it in like so, because what I want to do is I want to have the wax applied to the thread, but I don't want excess buildup. I don't want that being overly saturated where you're going to get lots of wax buildup to it. It really has a horrible body when you do that. So you can see there, I'm just kind of dabbing it into the thread. And then I'll clean my fingers off. So useful having a bit of kitchen roll or kitchen towel with you. From there, just a simple touch dubbing exercise. So I want to minimize the amount that's going to get adhered to the thread. So if there's too much, I can always go back and take some out. From there, I'll just close up my thread. I'll peel away areas I think there's too much build up to it. So if you tie anything like a dark watch shirt or anything along those lines, very, very similar stuff. Okay, from there I'm just going to tighten up my thread. So unfortunately a lot of that will be off camera, but I will hopefully do some tutorials later on in the tutorial section on how I actually do all this. So from there I'm just going to rough it in like a tackle, so just kind of peeling it back as a wrap. You want to go nice touching turns. Doesn't matter if you miss a bit, because you want that red or dark claret colour kind of bleeding through. That's not the end of the world, that. So I'm going to go pretty high up all the way there. If I've got a little bit left, I'll just backtrack and work back on myself like that. A few extra turns so I can go in with the purple ribbing. Now all I want to try and do is just kind of weave that through, just minimising how much I get caught in there. But we'll go in with a bit of Velcro too, just to make sure. Okay. Now, at this point, I'll also just go in with a little bit of Velcro. Just pry some extra fibres off if I can. And then counter rib with a wire. So with the wire, I will try not to overdo the ribbing. 3 to 4 is plenty. It's just there to act as an impression of gas buildup. Okay, so once we're in that spot there, and I'm going to open my thread back up. Now, this next dubbing mix I use is a blend of pine squirrel, hare's mask, and there's a tiny little bit of UV or simplified gold UV. So this is the older simplified gold UV. So you've got those like purpley kind of specks of UV glitter in there. So I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but that's the particular dubbing mix that I've used for this, and it's very sparsely done with the UV. Okay, I'm just going to kick that out of the way, put my thread back up. Tricky with all the camera work and stuff in the way. Right. Not quite getting that. Equal spacing that I like. Right, so once I got that, just back in with. Get all out of the way. Just go back in with that dubbing twister, just to hold it open for a little bit again. Same thing, in with the low tax wax. And exactly the same concept and principles. Yeah, I don't want to overload it, so I just prise it in by hand, load up with my fingers like so. Now with this, I do want to have a little bit more dubbing build up to it. And you can, if you really want to, you can use some of those like the magic clips that you get from Pedigon, or any of the clips and stuff if you want to make this a little bit more hacker-like, but I find this works perfectly. So I'll take my dubbing mix, and again I'll touch dab it. But now to catch a little bit more in there, I will just close the thread onto it, just like so, and then pull it out. So the idea there is I'm just trapping in a little bit more, a few more fibres. Okay, and then once I'm happy I've got that to where I want, I'll close my thread, go tighten. So if you do want to use clips and treat like you would do with, say, CDC, or trying to maybe make a CDC hackle, you could do. I don't bother with that. I just prefer doing it that way. So same thing, I'm going to work this back into the thorax section and just dub it backwards like so. Kind of peel it back like it does a wet hackle. So you can see I've not put a whole heap of dubbing into the thorax section. It is just there as impression of legs. Next bit, I'll take a lighter. I'll heat up a dubbing needle. So I've got a specific dubbing needle I use for this. I'll just singe it. I'll keep the legs down and back where I want them. Obviously, be careful if you're using flames and fire and heat, etc. So once I've got it to that position there, it's just in with the jungle cock. Now, when I put the jungle cock feathers in, I do not over wax the thread. I'll only wax the thread for the first kind of inch or two. And the reason for that is I don't want the thread darkening up in the head section. So everything with this fly pattern is very specifically put together. I'm just going to like my two jungle cock eyes, cheeks, whichever way you want to see them. So let's put a few turns in, drop them in place, check I've got them where I want them, use my tweezers just to make a nice little micro adjustments to it. Check that out where I want them. Hold final movements if I need to. I'll just peel those back. I'll work from the hook eye back just a few turns. Just don't want to open up the jungle cock if I can avoid it. There you go. Don't want to open up the nail if I can avoid it. Okay. Now I'm just going to put in a small head build up, just so you get that wine or claret colour coming through. And then in with a 5-turn whip finish. 5-turn tends to cover that adequately. And there you go. If you need to, just bend those in with your fingernail a little bit. Kind of give it a little more of a leggy look to them. And then in with the varnish, and we're done. Hope you've enjoyed that.